Hello, Garland Nixon here with my dear friend and brother, Dr. Tony Monteiro. He is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where all the talk was about how will Pennsylvania affect the outcome of the race. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here back with Dr. Tony Monteiro, a wonderful guest and a very, very dear friend of mine. And I learned so much from Dr. Monteiro, and we have such a wonderful conversation. So everyone, we thank him for coming back. Okay, here's where I'm going to start, Tony. Last week on my Pacifica show, before people said, "Well, give your predictions." I said, "Okay." I said, "Here's my predictions," and here's what I said. I said, notwithstanding the identities of the candidates, whether they're white, black, male, female, I said, bills are too high. I said, remember the New York guy, the rent's too damn high guy? I said, I believe that is what is affecting the election. I call it the misery index. I said, and I believe that Trump will probably win and that it won't be close, and that the Republicans will probably get the House, the Senate, they'll get everything because people are hurting, and any port in a storm. And I'm not saying Trump's going to do good. He may flop. He may do the worst things that we could have. Whatever. That's a whole different story to me. The story behind the election is the people that voted for Trump, why they voted for Trump. And interestingly enough, we have to get into this, the reaction of the liberal class and their whole identity politics thing. Anyway, let's start with this. You're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You see the misery index. Let's talk about your thoughts on the election, the outcome, the misery index, etc.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me again, Garland. Just the overall outcome of the election. This perhaps was, if not the greatest, one of the greatest electoral victories for a man and a party in the history of this country. The only thing that rivals it is the four elections of Franklin D. Roosevelt from the 1930s into the early 1940s. How to explain this? On the one side, you can attribute it and its sweeping nature to the bad economic times and the unpopularity of the Biden administration. Of course, Kamala Harris could not escape the weight of the negativity towards the Biden administration. No president had ever had such low approval ratings, and they just stayed low. They couldn't get them up, even before the debate debacle in June with Donald Trump. However, I think there is something far deeper and hence cannot be repaired by even better economic times. And that is that tens of millions of people reject the rule of the ruling elite. I think this was more political than it was economic and even attributable to the misery index or even immigration and open borders and that type of thing. I think that people were just fed up with the way this ruling class has ruled them, especially over the last close to 35 years. That's the way I see it. One cannot take lightly this victory. I saw that Trump could win Um, Definitely, even with all that had been thrown at him in terms of lawsuits, in terms of smearing him and equating him to an autocrat and a fascist and even Hitler, that I still saw a path for his victory. I had no idea it would be this sweeping, that the Democrats and when we say the Democrats at this stage, we're talking about the ruling class. It is the party of the ruling class. They suffered what for them is a defeat of unprecedented magnitude, where they cannot explain it, cannot recover, at least in the short run, from its devastation to them. And they're trying to figure out, what does this mean going forward? One of those situations where the ruling class is viewed as being illegitimate by the people of the country, the people they claim to govern and to rule. The people that they govern are saying, we don't accept your governance anymore. The election was a no. The question is, what will be the yes? What will come next?
You know, here's let me show you this. If for those who think that Dr. Monteiro is, doesn't see things quite the same, this is David Brooks.
Yes.
This is the New York Times. This is the voice of the elite. And look what they have now. They have a picture of a man who's just a working class, working poor guy. Voters to elites. Do you see me now? And he goes on to talk now. Look, we have entered a new political era, right? Now he goes on. Don't get me wrong. He misses he strikes out a couple times here. He hits a couple good things. But the bottom line is this. I always say this. The things that you talk about, the ruling elite understand this stuff. And what do you think about the New York Times having, of all puppets for the ruling elite, David Brooks, writing an article saying they're saying to you, you can't hear us. You ain't listening to us. So we reject you. What do you think about that kind of a reaction amidst the morning joes and all of the weeping and gnashing of teeth of the pundit class who say they don't want a woman or person of all the identity stuff? But David Brooks says, you know what? This is a rejection of the elites.
Yeah. No, David Brooks is right. I don't agree with him politically, but I consider him to be an honest analyst to the extent that he's able to do that. And so when David Brooks speaks, I try to listen, because he is, in a lot of ways, a clear voice coming from the ruling elite. And what he is saying is that the Democratic Party had thought that they had took and had bamboozled and had the masses of people. And the masses of people said, but no, you don't. I saw it clearly here in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania became that what they felt was the beginning of a blue wall, that if Kamala Harris could take Pennsylvania, then she had a good chance of taking Michigan and Wisconsin and probably winning the Electoral College. I saw it here, especially in Philadelphia. People talk a lot about the black vote and the black male vote, but they don't get it completely right. The mayor of our city, speaking on behalf of the Democratic machine, said that she projected that 650,000 voters would come out in Philadelphia and vote for Kamala Harris. As it turned out, 547,000 voted for her in Philadelphia. At least 100,000 fewer than they thought was possible. What we see is that at least 70,000 fewer voters, registered voters, came out for Kamala Harris as had come out for Joe Biden in 2020. And at least 40,000 fewer than had come out for Hillary Clinton. A not vote was a no vote for Kamala Harris. So as the returns came in, and I was watching them closely all Tuesday night, that was a drama in itself, because it seemed as though the returns were coming from the western part of the state towards the eastern part. And of course, there were many pundits and people, strategists and people in Kamala Harris's campaign who said that, well, the wall of resistance to the red wave coming across western and middle Pennsylvania would be the suburbs, and in particular, Bucks County. And it was so interesting to see how the Trump movement cut through what was perceived or believed to be the resistance like a hot knife cutting through butter. And after they didn't get what they wanted in Bucks County and other collar counties around Philadelphia, they said, well, our last hope for Pennsylvania is Philadelphia and the black vote. And the black vote, as they say, underperformed. Black men, at least 40% of them, either did not vote or voted for Trump. This is quite significant. They thus, the black male vote in particular, took down the Democratic machine in Philadelphia. The black political class, the labor leadership, the ministers, the so-called civil rights leaders, all fell in the face not so much of Donald Trump, but the black vote, the black voter, saying, we do not accept your leadership. For decades, you have told us that you were going to make things better. That is labor and the black leadership, the black political class. Things have only gotten worse. This is a moment of reckoning, and we are casting judgment upon you. And we are saying, we reject you. And this is very, very profound in a city like Philadelphia. And of course, this could be replicated in other places. I'm certain Detroit, I'm certain Milwaukee, Atlanta. Black folk have said differently than the white vote. And this is what we have to keep in mind. Every demographic was not behaving the same way, did not think the same way. Black folk have questions about Trump, as we should, and they will remain. But one thing they were clear about, at least a significant number of them, that the Democratic Party had betrayed us, had lied to us, had and bamboozled us. And now we were awake and we are casting our vote against you.
You know what's interesting? I look in the chat, and unfortunately, there's some people that don't really understand the foundation of our conversation. They're like, "Oh, but the Republicans are just as bad. They're both owned by the 1%." They don't understand the nature of this conversation. The nature of this conversation is not about Trump, and it's not even about the political parties. It's about something far more foundational in our society. I mean, do I have any delusions that Trump's going to walk in and be the second coming of FDR? Well, no, that's ridiculous. What we're talking about, Malcolm X talked about it. He said, first people got to wake up. When they're asleep, they can't do nothing. You got to wake them up. And I think it is the fact that the Democrats were soundly defeated, and what they're griping about now? They're going into these demographics. Well, this group failed us. The black that group failed us, right? And that is, in a way, what they're saying is, all across the board. We separate them into demographics. Garland, as I've always said, I view politics first and foremost through the lens of economic class. Don't get me wrong, race, all those stuff I understand, I take that into account. But what the Democrats can't say out loud, which some of them know, I will bet the leaders know. If you look at those numbers and you start I saw one thing and it was like people making under $50,000, people who didn't have college degrees. So it all pointed to the same thing. The people who are struggling rejected the lies, the misleadership of those who said, follow me and you won't struggle. And then when you kept struggling, they said, well, follow me because they're racist or sexist. Follow me, give me another fake reason. That the people who are struggling either, and this is important, either voted for Trump, voted for something else, or stayed home. Because they don't talk about all of these numbers about this group voted, that group, blah, 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 blah. A huge group of them just didn't show up at the polls at all. Said, look at the numbers. Oh, this amount of people voted for Biden. In the same area of this city, turnout was 60, 70% lower in some of these cities. Some of these areas of the country, in Appalachia, some of the poor white areas. People just didn't, they don't talk about how many people just said, I'm done with the system, I'm staying home. Because you can't categorize those people in the same way, Dr. Monteiro.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I can understand many people are traumatized by events that occurred on Tuesday. They just cannot understand it. And of course, so many people have been misled by the mainstream media, by the fear tactics, certainly the ruling elite, who wanted people to believe that there was a threat of fascism or Nazism, and so on. And all of that was rejected. And there are people sometimes on the left who say, well, the two parties are the same anyway. But this was not a matter of parties. I agree with you completely. To understand what happened, one has to understand a movement in many ways separate from Trump himself. Yes. This was much bigger than Trump. Many of the people who voted for Trump or who didn't vote don't agree with Trump on many things, and that goes for a lot of Black people. They voted for him as a vote against the ruling establishment. That's what they were doing. Then you look at polling numbers. I always reference this poll that came out somewhere in June, the New York Times, which said that 70% of the American people said, and these are their words, the political and economic systems had to be fundamentally reformed. 15% of them, which is something like 45 million Americans, said that the entire system had to be brought down and something new built. You are right. This was the most clear expression of class politics in a presidential election that we have perhaps ever seen. The working people of this country, the poor people of this country, the people in Butler, Pennsylvania, saw something similar in the people in North Philadelphia, one being white, the other being Black, but each sharing a common situation, as you put it, of misery and uncertainty, and each tended to behave politically in the same way. They said no to the existing ruling elite. And I think anyone who makes the argument that both of the parties are the same, well, at a certain level they are, but this was not a matter of parties. Trump took over a party by organizing a movement. That movement then grew beyond Trump. It grew beyond the Republican Party. It grew beyond the Democratic Party. It is something the likes of which we have never seen. We have never seen this. How could an outsider, a man who had been attacked in every way that you can attack a public figure, ends up winning the popular vote, a landslide in the electoral college, and the party that bears his name, actually, it is the Trump party, took the Senate back and will probably hold on to the House of Representatives and won a number of governorships. How do you explain a movement like this? And believe me, politically taking down the most powerful ruling elite in the Western or capitalist world. How do you explain it? Yeah, people say, well, sitting parties throughout the Western world have been cast out everywhere. Japan, France, or Germany, or Italy, they've been cast out. But France and Italy and Japan are not the United States. The United States is an imperial empire, the most powerful ruling class perhaps in human history. Taken down. Now, they're not out.
Right.
We have not reached the promised land. What will come next? That is what is uncertain. They will certainly fight back. I believe, and I would just suggest this as something we consider, that the ruling class will stoke demonstrations and try to create a situation that looks something like a civil war, because they've already begun blaming the people. Black men are being blamed. We saw the spectacle of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama attacking Black men for daring to think in ways that went against what Obama and the Democratic Party elite told them to think, and to suggest that they would vote for Trump or Jill Stein or not vote at all. And they excoriated Black men. And who were they? Who gave them that authority? And we had a reckoning with them. And now the Obamas, the Clintons, you are spent political forces. No one will listen to you again. And those people, and especially among Black people, I understand, because we are highly propagandized, especially in big cities. Our leadership is not a leadership, it is a misleadership. And so most Black people want to believe that people who look like us and are in positions of power have our best interest at heart. However, that is not the case. And once the dust settles and our people begin to think, and if possible, we initiate a democratic discussion among Black people, people will understand how what we thought was our leadership was in fact our misleadership. The labor movement, the rank and file of labor. And Garland, you and I are the sons of longshoremen, proud sons of longshoremen. And we respect working people, their ability to think, their ability to analyze. And when the rank and file of labor said to the leaders of labor, that was your decision to support Biden and Harris, that was not our decision. And we will do what we believe is in our class interest. The same thing with Black people. Philadelphia is a very, very poor city, very, very poor. It's all around us. It is not only the poverty of children, but the poverty of men. The poorest group of impoverished people in the city of Philadelphia, probably in the country, are Black children. The next poorest group are Black men. Black men who are poor in their 20s and 30s never get out of it. Poverty is a type of death march. That is for men and women, but especially for Black men. It is a death march. a poor black man can expect to have a very short life. A poor black man can expect to do some time in prison. A poor black man can expect to be disrespected by everyone and spoken to by even black elites in ways that we had become accustomed to white overseers speaking to us. You know, if you were to ask me, the most humiliated group in the society are black men, and especially young black men. And they are beginning to see a way out of this crisis for themselves. And they want to fight. And they are saying, and I listen because I ride public transportation, I know the city, and I listen to them and their cries for help. They are not the brutes and the savages that people portray them as. They're very vulnerable. Their hearts have been broken over and over again. And they're saying, give us the opportunity to fight. And we will fight, not just for ourselves, but for our children, for our communities, for our families. And that's what November 5th began, when they stood up and said no to the Black misleadership class, to the ruling elite that imprisoned them. Let's keep it real. That crime and anti-terrorism act of 1994 locked up 30% of young black men. And we have not recovered from the economic devastation brought on by that. So I say to any black person, you know, let the dust clear, think about things, look at the objective data, look at your community. Don't look away from the black community. Look at the conditions of black people. If you are part of the privileged class, if you have an education, if you have a better job, don't just think about your class. Don't just think about the people who are like you. Think about that child who doesn't have a father. Think about that child who has to go to a school where nobody cares about them and what that means. And that's the way we have to think as a people, as a community, and ultimately as a nation.
You know, as an example of what we're talking about, some people are still stuck in, you know, this, let's talk about the Republicans and Democrats, and the Republicans ain't going to do nothing for you. And I'm trying to explain this is not what that's about. You don't understand it. As an example, let me give you two examples. Young lady that I know, she's in her late 20s. She works and everything, don't make much money, got to stay with her aunt because she can't afford. And I mean, let me put it like this. The amount she makes is not all that small, but she still can't afford to put a roof over her house. So she has to stay with a family member, lives with a family members, right? Said to me, oh, I don't like Trump. You know, he called she's from, you know, originally a different country. She's an American citizen. He called my country a shithole country and blah, blah, and this and that. Oh, she rails about Trump. And then she says, I said, oh, so you don't like Trump? She says, yeah, but I'm voting for him. I said, what do you think? He's going to, she says, he ain't going to do nothing for nobody. She was going to vote. I didn't want to pretend like I come across as though I was prying into her business. I didn't want her to think anything, you know, untoward. She volunteered some info. You know, saw her regularly on the train when I was going back and forth to DC. And I didn't want to come across like, hey, who's this prying into my business? I listened, but I heard her say everything you're saying. I don't expect Trump to do nothing for me. Don't even like the man, but I'm voting for him. I will add one other thing. The Muslim voters in Dearborn, I heard an interview and they were talking to him and they were saying, well, but Trump's going to do the same thing as in the Middle East as Biden. They said, yeah, he probably is. And we'll fight against him when he does. Well, what are you doing? We're voting for Trump. Yeah. Or we're going to vote for Joe Stein. We're going to vote for Trump, or we're going to stay home. All of us, we ain't voting for the Democrats. They had no expectation. And when she said, the woman, it was like, MSNBC, well, why are you going to do that? She says, well, the only thing we have, basically the only power we have is our votes. And we can unseat the leadership of the most powerful country in the world, and we're going to do it. They had no expectation of getting anything else. But damn it, they was gonna make somebody pay. And I think to understand that is to understand that these people had a greater understanding of power dynamics than those who are still stuck in. If you expect that the Republicans are going to bail you out, or the Democrats are going to bail you out, or they're going to all suddenly turn into Eugene Debs, or you know what I mean, or whatever the case may be, into Lenin, you're wrong. But these people understood, I'm going to exercise the only power I got, and damn it, somebody's going to pay. The Muslims expect somebody's got to pay, and it's going to be the ruling elite.
Right, I agree with you, and I guess that I could engage in high theory about the class conflict as well as anybody can, but I think that's a dead-end street. It's more intellectual masturbation. I'm more interested in the narratives that you talk about, the stories of ordinary people, the existential question. What did that man on a certain bus that I'm riding on in Philadelphia say, unsolicited, about the election? Or what did he say about his condition? What did one of my friends who is homeless say in a conversation? And it is these narratives that can be produced millions of times when people thousands of miles apart, let us say in Philadelphia, North Philly, and in South Side of Chicago, are basically saying the same thing. Or, again, a white person in Butler, Pennsylvania, a deindustrialized city where the only public work or a project that has been built in Butler, Pennsylvania in over 50 years is a monument to its citizens who died from fentanyl overdoses. This is the only public work that has been built in this deindustrialized city. And then I think about deindustrialized North Philadelphia. And I go there, I travel around because, Lee Morgan and McCoy Tyner and so many great jazz and R&B musicians come from North Philadelphia. And I know where they come from. And when I go to where they grew up, I see these factories that no longer are factories. And I said, I can imagine the great Lee Morgan, the great trumpeter, as a kid selling newspapers or getting on a trolley going to school, seeing men and women going to work and working in factories. And now those same children see shuttered factories and see men, and especially men, standing on street corners with nowhere to go and see their community in decline. This is where the truth of this moment can be found, not in theory, but in lives of human beings. And these human beings are not unmindful. These are people who can think. This is why Kamala Harris made such a huge mistake in her campaigning, to think that the only way you can get Black people out to a political rally is to have Beyonce or Megan Thee Stallion or some rapper or some pop star. No, that insulted us. And that's one of the big questions, by the way, with this ruling elite. When people feel that you insult them regularly, and that's Obama's career, insulting Black people. Let's keep it real. Now, a lot of people want to say, well, let's not look at that because he's the first black president. And I put quotes around that black because there's nothing in his genealogy which traces him back to enslavement or Jim Crow or the struggle against it. He don't feel what we feel. Let's keep it real. He's a performer. He's a dilettante. But many people wanted to believe. Many people wanted to believe. And in the end, he went about his way only coming out during presidential elections to insult us. And we handed him his hat to him and said, keep it moving, brother. We no longer need you. We have gone beyond you. And that's where we're at. The country has moved beyond that. November 5th was an example of it. It did not start it. It was a high point. It is not the end. Again, Garland, I would say the ball is now in the court of the ruling elite. You know, you can read David Brooks. You can read other columnists in the New York Times, many of them brilliant thinkers for the ruling class, but nonetheless brilliant. You can't dismiss them. And they are saying that if we are to hold on to power, one thing they said, we have to listen to working people. It might be too little, too late, you know? That's one thing they're saying. The other thing they're saying, they're asking, how can we reassemble the Democratic Party? Because Trump has what is called the Republican Party. It's not even it's the Trump Party. But how can we get this Democratic Party back together? Well, one thing that is happening already among them is what they call a circular firing squad. They're going at each other. The Pelosi faction, the Obama faction, the Clinton faction. Well, the Biden people are super angry. And all of these factions. And then you add to that all of the institutions of what they call civil society, the nonprofits, the non-governmental, the philanthropic organizations that appear to be so-called civil rights or so-called women's rights, but are really agents of the Democratic Party. You take the philanthropic organizations, the universities, especially the elite ones, were delivered a serious blow. And their theories of wokeness, their theories of gender and sexuality and race, these theories that ultimately end up attacking the American people. And then they become the paradigm, the framework of the political discourse of the Democratic Party and hence of the ruling elite. But this attack upon various sections of the masses and to split them, to separate men from women, black men from black women, to separate white from black, to totally dismiss any class organizing or class unity across racial and ethnic lines. But we saw it coming into existence. I like to underline, coming into existence. Nothing has been fully crystallized. We are only at the start of a new stage. The old has pretty much been brought down. The new can only be created by the activism and consciousness of ordinary people.
You know, getting back to something else that I think is a critical part of the conversation, and that is, you know, when the Muslims said we have no expectations that whoever replaces, you know, Trump, the Republicans, or anybody is going to do anything different in Gaza, we have no expectations. But damn it, we're going to make these people pay for what they've done, right? We're going to send a message, a long-term message. You know, I was reading, you know, Ohio was called real early in the night. When I saw, as soon as I saw Ohio go, I said, well, I know they haven't been chance in mission to begin. I really called it. When I saw Florida go early, When I saw Ohio go early, I said no, because they're going to lose Ohio, they're going to lose Michigan, which the trend is they're done. I called we were early. That's it. It's game over. I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me in a second. But at any rate, I know I was talking about Gaza. So in Ohio, what they said was all of these colleges where normally the kids are lined up at the polling, blah, blah, blah. They were going to the polling booths on the colleges. They were empty. The kids weren't voting. I think there was a lot of people in this country that out of anger and fury were looking at the ruling elite saying, based on what we're seeing in Gaza, the horror that we're seeing, we know who you are. You fooled us. And now we see you for who you are. I don't think those college kids voted for Trump. I think they did what college kids do. They went out to some beer, or they smoked weed, or they went back to played video games. I guess whatever college kids do, that's what they did. They damn sure did not vote for Kamala Harris. And I think that the issue of Gaza, it's not just about now. That these young people, our impressionable young people, looked at the ruling elite and they said, you fooled us. We thought you told us you were here for the LGBTQ and women, all the minority, that you were doing good. And then we saw the evil that you do in Gaza. And we tried our best to come to our college and to protest, and you sent the men with the sticks in to beat the hell out of us. We know who you are. They have lost that generation because of the evil that they're doing in Gaza forever. They haven't just lost them. Those people want to pay them back. They want to unseat them if they ever get a chance. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. And what happened to those students was a disgrace. In Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, at the University of Pennsylvania, there was a beautiful encampment. I participated in it. I'm proud to say I was invited to, but I would have gone invited or not invited, to give support and solidarity. And the university and the city police and the governor, who was seething because he's saying now we would have won Pennsylvania had I been chosen as the vice president rather than the guy from Minnesota. But he was brutal, a brutal Zionist. And they shut down the encampment. And then the fall came, the fall semester, and a small group of students gathered in the central part of the campus to read out the names of people killed in the Israeli attack upon Lebanon. And they were surrounded by campus and city police. And bullhorns were used to shout at them, this is an unauthorized gathering. And they were pushed off of the campus. And so they went on to the sidewalks of the streets and they marched and they read names, all the time intimidated and surrounded by police. This is what universities have become. They have become the enemies of their own students. And this is not just with students. This is with the American people. They're looking for a moral center. You don't have to always be successful. Government fails. Government doesn't get it right most of the time, let us say. But at least let us think that you proceed from a moral standpoint, a standpoint of right and wrong. And you're right. The Arabs and Palestinians in Michigan who say, we don't know what Trump is going to do, but we do know one thing, what the Biden-Harris administration did. 2,000-pound bombs dropped on people in tents, burning men, women, and children to death. War crimes, perhaps that we have never seen. Crimes that equal Hitler's Nazi regime. People said, this is too much. This is too much. And I think there are many factors contributing to the vote on Tuesday. It wasn't just the economy, it was and immigration. There were moral questions, there were foreign policy questions, there were questions of why you spending $175 billion in Ukraine. And you can't do nothing about the schools. You can't do nothing about the cost of rent. You can't do anything about the plight of children and youth. You see, these are questions that go beyond narrow political judgments and calculus. The ruling elite, they don't understand ordinary people. Yeah, David Brooks, you're right. The working class said, do you see us now? But the ruling class can never see the working class in its full, total humanity. And really, they will never understand or see Black folk. We, in their eyes, are a diminished, dangerous, ignorant group of people. And you know, the irony is we call them the Black misleadership class because they pretty much agree with that view of ordinary Black people. You know, let's be real.
Obama, perfect example. The way he talked to Black folks.
Yeah.
You couldn't bring somebody, you couldn't resurrect somebody from a plantation that beat slaves every day and have them come up with anything much different than Obama's shaking his finger and preaching, you better do, and as if they're stupid enough, as if Black voters are stupid enough that if you say to them, you don't like women, that they'll somehow put their heads down and they'll look inside themselves and say, I must not like women. Instead of saying, I got bigger fish to fry here. I can't afford to live. You're committing a genocide. I'm sick. You're lying to me. I heard a man in Baltimore say, we've been putting Democrats in office since the 60s. Mm-hmm. I look around my community, the same abandoned buildings, the same issues, the same crime, the same police issues. Every issue we had just gets worse. So he didn't have an expectation. I think it is what people don't give. He didn't have an expectation that he was voting for someone it wasn't transactional. I'm going to vote for somebody that's going to bail me out. That's what and I usually see people in the chat. They don't understand that sometimes a vote is a way to give somebody the middle damn finger. Yeah, that guy ain't going to do nothing for me. I will get my revenge. I will it's a way to scream out and say, I've had it with you. It's not simply, if you're caught in this, one of these parties got to save me. And if you can't figure out, and if you go to this vote for this or that, then somehow you think that guy's going to save you. That's not what it means. To some people, it is, I've had enough of you. I'm going to do something different. Oh, maybe I'll get something. Maybe I won't. I'm going to make a point. That's what some people just can't get. That to many people, the only voice, the Muslim people say, the only voice we got, the only power we got, and we're going to use it to say something. It may be limited in what we can say, but we can say something, and doggone it, we're going to say it as loud as we can say it.
And you know, Garland, you know, in academic philosophy, if you don't mind me using this phrase, it's something we call social epistemology. Epistemology is a way of knowing things, how you come to know. Social is when that way of knowing is connected to the conditions of your life. For example, a Black person living in poverty, which is about 50% of Black people in Philadelphia, know the world on different terms and in different ways than an elite does. You can listen to them on your morning talk show, let us say MSNBC or CNN. All of those people speak using or through an epistemology that upholds the elite and looks at the world in ways that elites do. You know, the calculus of an ordinary working class person, be he Latino, Black, white, Native American, Asian, is fundamentally different. You know it from your experience. I know it from my experience growing up in Black Philadelphia. Black people have a different way of coming to know, hence to judge the world in which they live. They don't always have the ability to put into full force the knowledge that they have. They're more often than not told to keep quiet, to shut up, that elites and experts know everything, you know nothing. But at the end of the day, and this is why I am so interested in the stories that you tell about the people that you know and encounter in Baltimore. And then I tell the stories about people I know and encounter in Philadelphia. Their calculus, their way of coming to a decision about what to do, and politically what to do, and politically how to behave in an election of this consequence. And they knew it was of great consequence. A poor Black person, and I know I'm saying something that I've been saying again and again, a poor Black person who decides either to vote for Trump or not to vote at all, based that upon a different calculus than, let us say, an Al Sharpton or a
Joy Reid,
Joy Reid, or a Clyburn in South Carolina, or the Black or Hakeem Jeffrey. Those Black people think through the eyes and the epistemology of the ruling elite. The ordinary Black person does not think the way they think, does not judge the world the way they judge the world, does not come to conclusions about what to do in the ways that they do. And hence, on November the 5th, we began to see this crystallizing. I would make the argument and would be prepared to debate it, that this election was not only a defeat for Kamala Harris, but it took down the Black misleadership class, the Black political class. And if they have an ounce of sense, they will reconsider their relationship to Black people, because Black people made a judgment on them on November 5th.
I will even say this, to some extent, I don't think they'll have a choice. And I'll tell you why. Because they're masters. You know, we see it in Africa. We see it in different places where they put in, you know, the British have put in some comprador class. And so they just sell out the people in their country constantly. And then maybe eventually the people in their country cool and say, no, you look at what's happening in the Sahel region. They had these backstabbing comprador class, and the people eventually said, we can't take it no more. We're sick and tired of being impoverished, right? Here's the thing, what happens? And here's the question. I know in the halls of the sellouts and the Black misleadership class, they're looking at each other in horror, because here's what they know. Their bosses come to them, whether it's Jim Clyburn or whoever, and they say, look, you got to deliver us the Black vote. And they say, don't worry about it, master. I will deliver you the Black vote. I drive in the Black car. I ride in the back of the Black car. I eat in a 5-star restaurant. I travel in first class. I live a good life, right? Got it all that I could possibly have. And all I have to do is deliver the votes of the Black community. So I got you covered. And this comes by. And now their leaders are coming to them saying, wait a minute, what am I paying you for? I've got you living all this stuff. I'm taking care of you. What do I need you for? You didn't deliver me the Black vote. And the Black voters said, we're not listening to them anymore. They have become dispensable. That's their problem. You know what? They're a man without an island, because the Black community has said, we are done with you. You've done nothing for us. You've lied, you've cheated, you've stolen, you've enriched yourself. You've been involved in all manner of corruption. And we get nothing out of it. We're done. We ain't listening to you no more. We're going to vote elsewhere just to see what happens. And now they're like, oh, well, they're going to go back to their masters in wherever they are, their billion-dollar donors, and say, the donor's going to say, you didn't come through. What do we need you for? And now they sit out there between the Black community who has rejected them and their donors who have looked at them and said, you were always a dispensable asset. You're not an asset. You're now a dispensable liability. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. And as you and I have spoken about these things over the months and years, sometimes you reach a moment in social history, a fork in the road, if you will, where certain questions that were not previously on the table are now on the table. For example, the issue of the people themselves taking power through democratic means to institute a new democracy, a people's democracy. That would constitute a revolutionary change. Some people have assessed that what happened on November 5th in the election, the sweeping nature of it, the sweeping takedown of the ruling elite, constituted a revolution of sorts. I believe it created pre-revolutionary conditions. But a revolutionary situation or condition does not last forever, because the ruling elite are also busy, and they have enormous resources. They're used to ruling. They know what power looks like, how to use it. And even though Trump and his movement took over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, let us be real. The ruling class still controls the military and the state and the intelligence services, and can still do enormous damage to society and to the people. And in some ways, they are capable of doing to the people of the United States what they've done in other countries, such as Haiti, for example, and make conditions so bad for the masses that it looks like the ruin of society itself. You don't want to go along with us? Well, we're going to make life unbearable for you. The other thing, and I often, not with joy, but we have to consider this, that the ruling elite might wish to impose a civil war. Now, what that would look like is not quite certain, but a civil war is a situation, you can have an intense one, a low-level one, where the sides square off in such a way as one of the sides must be defeated for the other side to live. The people, however, want a democratic solution, not a civil war solution. The ruling class is not interested in a democratic path towards a new democracy. They don't want democracy at all. They are very satisfied with an elite authoritarianism which operates in the name of democracy. We let you vote. What more do you want? While we starve you to death. But but I hope I'm making myself clear.
Yes, very clear.
People, really, I'm convinced of this, Garland, with all the talk by the ruling elite who lost the election, that this is the people's fault. They want a fascist dictator. They are everything wrong. They're racist, they're homophobes, they're transphobes, everything. But the people are the reservoir of democracy in this society, have been and are today, perhaps more so today than they were at the height of the civil rights movement. A great democratic renaissance for the nation. But I think that the possibilities of democracy coming from the people are greater now than they were then. For leftists, for, quote, revolutionary thinkers and activists, I would say to all of us, return to the people. That is from whence your strength comes. Don't call yourself a revolutionary and you don't have any connections to the working class. Don't say you're a revolutionary in Philadelphia and don't know anything about the poor and the working poor in North Philly and West Philly. If you're afraid of Black people, you ain't going to be no revolutionary because you're not going to be able to connect to them. But they are the wellspring of the new, if a new is to be born.
You know, something else I think is interesting that demonstrates the class nature of what we'll call this change, whatever you want to use. I was looking at some numbers. In 90% of the counties and districts, you know, counties or municipalities or whatever in the nation, Donald Trump improved, raised the number of people that voted for him. Almost the entire country. Now, look, go through Nebraska and Iowa. Well, ain't a whole lot of Black folks or even Latinos. It's lily white farm people, right? They saw and felt the same thing as the Black person in East Baltimore, the Latino guy in Philly or wherever the case may be, you know, Reading, Pennsylvania, the guy on the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland who runs a workboat and for crabbing, no matter what, the people that live in the mountains, whatever, all over. The ubiquitous nature of this tells me that there's something far deeper than just prices, race,
Yes.
religion, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ. There's something far deeper going on in here when people in 90% of the districts all went in one direction. And as I said, I heard it time and time again, don't like Donald Trump. Can't stand him. But you know what else I heard from a lot of these people? Interestingly enough, I'd say, well, what do you think about the charges? Oh man, you know, they just did that bullshit to take him out. People understood that the ruling elite was just charging. And I would argue this, from what I heard, I think every time they said he's convicted, he's a felon, what people heard was, y'all really don't like this man.
Yeah.
You really hate him, don't you? And I really hate you. Now I know how to really dig in. Go ahead, your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm in a celebratory mood, but my celebration is of the people. I feel a sense of pride in what the people achieved, and it was their achievement. Donald Trump could have never imagined this, and certainly his campaign people, they didn't understand this. They didn't understand what happened. This was the people. You know, they tried to use this thing of this comedian talking about Puerto Rico as a floating garbage dump. Well, it's not completely untrue because places like New York City was shipping garbage and trash down to Puerto Rico.
Yep.
And part of Puerto Rico, Vieques, was used as a nuclear testing site. And we don't know what happened to the nuclear waste there. So they used it as such, but they were trying to flip it and to use it to get Puerto Rican votes. Well, Allentown, Pennsylvania is a major a city where Puerto Ricans live. And they voted for Trump. They were not fooled by it. I agree with you. We have to know more about the American people. You know, I'm very interested in geostrategic politics. I'm very concerned and like to know and follow the movements on a world scale, the multipolar world. But none of it means nothing. All of it means nothing unless I know my people, because this is what I can best affect. And if there is to be change on a world scale, We must change America and America's role in the world. If I could just say one thing about the connection of geopolitics to domestic politics. You know, Richard Haas was the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, the major foreign policy think tank in the United States. And he was retiring last December, and he gave an interview to the New York Times. And he said the greatest security threat to the United States is not China or Russia or North Korea or Iran. He said the greatest security threat to the United States, by which he meant the US empire, was the US people. The US people. He acknowledged what very few leftists and radicals could acknowledge, that the American people didn't want to study war anymore. They didn't want the neocon policy of aggression, of genocide and so on. And hence, they were a greater threat, national security threat, than China or Russia. I agree with Richard Haas. And I think in interesting ways, the election was an intertwining and overlapping of the domestic and international concerns. I know among Black people, certainly among the Arab and Palestinian communities, we don't like to see children killed like this in Gaza. We don't like that. We don't like that our tax dollars are supporting that. We don't like it. And we acted, and we will act again and again. I think, again, Garland, we're on the cusp of something new and perhaps something great and something profoundly transformative. And I'm happy and optimistic in a certain sense.
You know, one last thing. I know we both have things to do today, but one last thing that I think I have to get your thoughts on. It's important for this audience. Mm-hmm. On the night of the election, I got invited to a studio, and Scott Ritter and a couple other people, and they said, look, why don't y'all do come to the Garland, you and Scott come to the studio up in Kingston, New York, and we're going to start at 7:00, and we'll just have a TV on there, and as things come in, we'll discuss them. We'll talk about all these things. We'll just talk 7 hours, right? I thought, yeah, I look up sometime and I might have, like now I got 400 people watching, depending. Sometimes it could be 300-400. It could be a couple thousand. Okay. At a given time.
Yeah.
So I thought, we'll get a couple thousand people watching. It is. Shortly after we started, I asked the guy who was running the thing, I said, many people? He said 23,000. Over the course of the night, the numbers must have been 100,000 people watching at one time. I talked to other friends. Oh, what'd you do? Well, I was watching on Due Dissidence, their channel. I was watching on Jimmy Dore. Talked to another friend who's a Trump guy. I said, hey, my fishing buddy of mine, who's a good friend of mine. He's a big Trump supporter. He's a Republican. We're good friends, known him for years, right? We both like fishing. And, oh, yeah, I was watching it on so-and-so's conservative channel on Rumble. But now I kept switching back because YouTube had this, and then this other one was right. And I come to realize millions and millions and millions of people. If we had 100,000 watching us at any given time, and we just did this out of the blue at kind of a last minute, and everybody I talked to was jumping from show to show on Rumble, on YouTube, on this and that. They were thoroughly rejecting the mouthpieces for the ruling elite on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox. They were going to alternative media, and they wanted to hear. And you know what people said? They said, I listen to you guys. You guys just sound like regular people sitting on a couch, just running off at the mouth.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts about what appears to be a thorough rejection of these propagandists?
Oh, it's again a profound shift. A paradigm shift. The mainstream media is not believed or listened to by the majority of people. And that's good. And that's part of breaking the propaganda and ideological stranglehold that the ruling elite has over the people. The people have walked away from them and have found alternative sources of information and thought. And what people really want, I think, what they saw in you all were people discussing things, not just talking at people, but discussing ideas, weighing events and data and so on and so forth. People want to be a part of conversations and not be having fingers pointed at them and spoken down to. I think that explains it all. I think the mainstream media is done in this form, that he might try to take over YouTube in a way to deplatform people. I guess they're already doing that. But there are too many of us popping up all the time. Some huge like you all and you, Garland. Some just small mom and pop events, and people find them and get interested in them. And once you break the ideological and propaganda control of the ruling class, well, they've lost the people because their line cannot be hegemonic. The people can go to other sources and make up their own minds. I think that's what's happening. The environment is politically and ideologically fluid. And it's because the people have decided this. This is a people's movement. And if anything, Trump should be given credit for a number of things. The fact that he weathered a storm that no politician in the history of this country has ever had to weather. No one. Assassinations, impeachments, lawsuit. I mean, come on. The fact that he stood in spite of all of this says a lot about him. And you don't have to love him to acknowledge that he is definitely a man with a lot of courage, unlike, well, the normal politician, run-of-the-mill politician. And people respected the fact, whether they agreed with him or not, that he would stand in front of an audience of 30,000 and talk just like he was talking to the average person on a street corner. He spoke his mind, whether it was right or wrong, and he said to people, judge me by my flaws and my strengths. I think that's what people saw. A man very much like most men and women who, when they speak their mind, make mistakes and at other times get it right. But the people want somebody that's unscripted. Yes, you can just read off of a teleprompter that some quote political genius wrote for you. But then it's another thing to bare your soul, to bare your heart, and even to risk your life for something you believed in. He has a lot of political capital. It would be hard to break him, for the ruling class to break him. And that is why I say the knives are out. We have to be prepared for other assassination attempts. I hope the ruling class will think better. They have to compromise. If they want to fight this movement to the bitter end, I don't think they can win. I think they can do a great deal of damage to society. But I think we're at a point where the people can't be stopped easily.
You know what else I think? By saying this, and I think that the ruling elite, like so many people who have been, we've been taught it's about Obama or Trump or, whoever, Reagan or whatever, right? Okay. I think that what they're going to find out, what the ruling elite's going to find out is they'll try, okay, this is Trumpism, Trump. That once something like this happens, other figures will arise. Other people, younger people will arise. I think a problem, I got to say this, the Democratic Party is going to have a problem, a big problem, because the only way they can survive in 2028, there's only one way to survive. They've got to have a primary and let the people choose. They've stolen 3 straight. If they steal another one, they won't they're barely viable as a party. They won't be viable as a party, right?
I agree with that.
If they do that, someone will stand up in the Democratic Party and say, I'm opposed to what happened in Gaza. Somebody in the Democratic Party will say, I'm opposed to this neoliberal crap that's screwing over the working class. I'm opposed to empire and warmonger and all these. Somebody in the Democratic Party will stand up and say that. Some young person who's 36 years old in one day, they can run. And that person will beat the hell out of everybody else that's running. And that would be, so their only hope for survival is to allow an open primary. And if that happens, all those people who said, I'm not going to vote, all those people said, I'm staying home, I'm voting for Trump, all those Muslims, all those school students who said, blah, 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 I'm sick of this. If a person who they believe, who's not a member of not a puppet for the ruling elite, runs and says, you know, we got to do something about these student loans. And they look at that person and they believe that person ain't one of them. That person would beat the crap out of everybody else, which would in itself be a different kind of death for the Democratic Party, but it would be a death and a rebirth of the Democratic Party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm quite skeptical. I think it's going to be kind of like the destruction of all sides. I don't see how it can survive.
Yeah.
You know, I could be wrong, but I think the internal antagonisms are so sharp. And then they're only exacerbated as a result of this sweeping defeat. A sweeping defeat. I don't see how they can survive. I don't think the progressives and social democrats have what it takes, because they too look down upon ordinary people and were part and are part of the debacle that took place in this last election. So
good point.
They might not be able to survive as a party. You know?
Yeah, that's a good point, because the people that I were the angriest at, Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yes.
AIPAC had a advertisement with Bernie Sanders. Oh, we can't have a ceasefire because it'll help Hamas. And I thought, what the hell? This is the guy that I supported in 2016. When I saw AOC, oh, well, we've got to support Biden. And I'm like, you all are just ignoring a genocide? You know? And so I think that what once masqueraded as some kind of progressive left, democratic socialist, whatever you want to call it, a wing of the Democratic Party has been exposed as frauds and sellouts in the same way that the Black leadership class has been exposed as frauds and sellouts.
Oh yeah. See, but then there's that level of political theory. Are we at the end of liberalism as a political philosophy and as a organizing theory for the state? Is liberalism done? You know, Francis Fukuyama, 30-some years ago, talked about the end of history. Well, has it come in a way that he could have never thought? He thought the end of communism was the end of history, but perhaps it only laid the basis for the end of liberalism as a political theory, as a political philosophy. And will a new set of theories, a new way of thinking about the state, about citizenship, about civil rights, and more importantly, about human rights, supersede liberalism. So, I mean, this is, we're in a place that we've never been, but I think it's a good place to be.
Well, I always go back to Malcolm X.
Yeah.
When he said, you come to the field slave, and a field slave's life is, he lives in so much misery that when you say to the field slave, let's run away, he says, any place is better than here. And I think the theory of November 5th in so many Americans' minds was not we love, and I heard it. It wasn't we love Trump. Oh, he's going to save us. Oh, his policy is going to be great. Oh, now the Republicans. It was any place is better than here. And somebody, I'm hurting. I'm unhappy. And somebody going to pay. And somebody pay. Dr. Tony Monteiro, where can people find you and all the good work that you do with your Saturday Free School online?
Well, as you can see, I have a shirt on announcing the year of James Baldwin. This is the year of his centenary. And you can find us the Year of James Baldwin website. You can also find us, the Saturday Free School, on Facebook, on Twitter. And if you want to listen to our weekly discussions and analyses, you can find us on YouTube, the Saturday Free School, or on Facebook Live, or on Spotify. You can just listen, and you find out what we do. And then we put out a journal called Avant-Garde, a journal of peace, democracy, and science. And our recent issue is a dedication of James Baldwin. It's called James Arthur Baldwin, The Mountain Upon Which We Fight. And there are articles on him and such. So that's what we do, but we don't separate the study of James Baldwin from theorizing about the crisis of this moment. We feel that, for example, Du Bois and Baldwin and Martin Luther King laid a foundation for an American future beyond the liberal dogma and frankly, beyond the dogma of many radical thinkers. So that's what we do, and that's where you can find us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and I look forward to hopefully, I'll talk with you, and hopefully next week, I'm sure many things will happen, and we will. I'm looking forward to what I'm going to see in the New York Times and the Washington Post Sunday paper.
Oh, yeah.
These kinds of things is going to be interesting. The reaction is going to be interesting. Thank you very much, everyone. Don't forget, share this on the click like, subscribe to this channel if you're not a subscriber, and share this on all your social media platforms. There's a lot of shadow banning and things like that. But for instance, we got 392 people right now. If we get 392 posts on Facebook or YouTube or or X or anything like that, or we'll get a lot more views. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, we are out.